Hello, sweet children of mine. We are on episode 4 of History, Horror, and More. It's still Women's History Month, so I did promise we were going to get into women-themed horror movies, which we are. Today's episode is going to be about witches. The historical aspect is going to be about the Salem witch trials, which you may know something about, you may not. I had the privilege in 2018 of going to Salem, Massachusetts, where all of this took place. I was lucky enough to go to Old Burying Point Cemetery. I did get to see the area that they have large stones carved with all of the people that were executed, with the date that they were executed, almost like tombstones. And it's gorgeous, and it's really nice to see that people still come and they leave little trinkets and flowers and things like that. So these souls are still being acknowledged, which is fantastic. So I took a lot of notes, so let's get into it. Salem witch trials were from 1692 to 1693, and they were all due to puritanical madness. People in this area, New England, were Puritan, and they were very, very religious. I'm not going to get into a lot of it because there is a lot to digest, and we'll do more on that later, because a lot of men were involved, naturally, because a lot of the problems that started the witch craze was land disputes. And if you know anything about women historically, they are screwed over often. This was no exception. A lot of times in Salem, and most of the world at this point, but specifically in Salem, men really took over everything. If you were married to a man and he died, you were to marry the next oldest man in his family. You, as a woman, had to be married. If you weren't married, even if you were married in this case, because the witch trials started to build because of, one, land disputes. People just didn't like each other. So, Goody Proctor saw you making eyes at her man. Guess what? Her cow's sick, her crops have failed, you're a witch. You did it. You appeared to him as a specter in the night. You tried to engage in sexual activities with him as a specter. These are some of the things that the women and men of Salem accused these unfortunate souls of. There were trials. The trials were usually just, there shouldn't have been a trial, they should have just went straight to hanging, because everybody was considered guilty. I'm going to talk about the first witch that was hanged. First witch that was hanged, Bridget Bishop. Her monument stone was so beautiful, and I feel for her the most. She was the first one executed, and a lot of this really stems from, and unfortunately, it's women against women. And when I start talking about some of the witch movies, you're going to see the same theme where it's women on women hate crimes, and also men, but the worst part is women. So specifically in this situation in Salem, it was a lot of women accusing women of witchcraft. The poor slave girl Tituba was accused by the children, the female parties in the family. There was a lot of finger pointing, again, going back to, if somebody saw you look at their husband, or if you traded soap with them and it didn't turn out right, you were a witch. It's crazy, too, because in the case of Bridget Bishop, she had been married 3 times, which was very, very frowned upon, despite the fact that women had to be married, because if they were single, there was something wrong with them. And also, this would lead to people thinking you were a witch. So it was kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So poor Bridget, it's been rumored that she owned a tavern. Originally, this was what one of the issues was, but it's been recently disputed, so I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read that much. That was actually kind of a new finding for me after a lot of the research I did in college and partially in grad school. So I'm going to learn something new when I do a deep dive in that. And when we revisit this topic, it'll be full of new information for everyone. So she was married several times, It was believed that she was a witch because she owned a tavern. Maybe, maybe not. But in most of the historical texts, she owned a tavern. And the worst part was that she hosted loud, rowdy shuffleboard games. The men of Salem would come and drink and be boisterous and play shuffleboard till all hours of the night, making Bridget Bishop something that was to be frowned upon. She was not a proper lady. She was running an establishment with alcohol. Men were still going there. You know, that tavern was being utilized by people in Salem. So it's kind of goofy, you know? Like, what's going on? Supposedly, she had poppets in her basement. When she was having something done in the basement, these men saw these poppets, which are basically like little dolls used for witchcraft. Not necessarily bad. Supposedly, they found them, and supposedly one of the merchants said that Bridget had come to him and wanted him to dye silks for her that she could make into little dresses for these poppets. Whether or not that happened, we don't know, because it didn't matter. They said that it did, and she was punished for it. So when we get into the women against women, a lot of the women that were accused by women. There was such terrible religious fervor that everyone was basically on trial without being on trial. So you had to accuse people almost to like make yourself look like you weren't dabbling in witchcraft. The land disputes, which is something I do want to get into. There was a very prominent family, the Putnam family, and they had a lot of land. This led to them wanting more land because apparently property lines back then were a little sketchy. And that's essentially what a lot of these women were accused of witchcraft, so that their land could be taken by the Putnam family. Pretty fucked up, right? There's my first curse. Get it? My first curse. Anyway. So that was not good. That was a bad joke. Welcome. So, witch movies, you gotta love them, right? So we're gonna talk about one of my favorites, the phenomenal The Witch 2015. Fantastic. Anna Taylor-Joy, very young. We have Black Phillip, the goat, which essentially it's up to you, but he's supposed to be an agent of Satan. This movie is great because it also is about Puritans and their madness and religious fervor and what's a sin. So I'm going to play a clip from The Witch that is fantastic, and spoiler alert, you know, there is actually witchcraft in this movie. So I'll play that clip and we'll get back into the conversation.
Black Phillip, I conjure thee to speak to me. Speak as thou dost speak to Jonas and Mercy. Dost thou understand my English tongue? Answer me.
What dost thou want?
What canst thou give?
Wouldst thou like the taste of butter? A pretty dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
Wouldst thou like to see the world?
What will you from me?
Dost thou see a book before thee? gift.
I cannot write my name.
I will guide thy.
Diving back in, one of my other favorites is The Love Witch from 2016. Elaine is my hero. I love her. Elaine is the love witch in the movie. And she just wants to be loved, man. She just wants love. But unfortunately for Elaine, she also engages on women hate. And she does some not so nice things to a friend's husband. Spoiler alert. She uses magic and spells to win men's hearts, but it never goes her way, which essentially makes her do it more, and shenanigans happen. I'm also going to play a clip from this movie. I do edit the first part out just because I don't want to get flagged. You'll get the tone of what she's actually saying. So I'll play that right now.
What a baby. I thought I'd found a real man, but he's just like a little girl. No one was ever there for me when I was crying my heart out. No one ever comforted me. No one.
Then we get into the classic movie from 1996, The Craft, star-studded cast. Really portrays the 90s goth scene, just a young Skeet Ulrich, just Fairuza Balk, Neve Campbell, so many good actresses, actors. The movie's phenomenal, the fashion, the music, the characters. So let's dive into that. There's more women on women hate in this movie. The lead girl, I guess you would say, Sarah, comes to the school. She sees all these outcasts who kind of like her vibe. They can kind of sense something. The three girls, Rochelle, Nancy, and Bonnie, they end up joining forces with Sarah. It appears throughout the movie that Sarah is the one that actually has the real power. They perform spells, shenanigans happen, and like the Love Witch, there's a lot of personal gain in this movie, using magic for personal gain, as opposed to using magic for something else. In this movie, all four girls have something that they want, something, that they need to use magic to attain, instant gratification. Unfortunately, things take a turn with the girls, and I won't say any more because the movie is fantastic. And if you haven't seen it, you need to get on it right now. So the last movie I'm going to get into is my absolute favorite movie, 1977's Suspiria. I will not acknowledge the remake, which was absolute trash. That's the hill I'm gonna die on. This amazing Italian band Goblin does the soundtrack for Suspiria. It's amazing. It's so good and it's so unsettling. Dario Argento directs this movie, and Argento movies are very unsettling. But one of my favorite factoids about this movie is that Dario Argento would play Goblin non-stop while they were filming because he wanted to create a very creepy atmosphere, which I'm sure did. And whenever I put Goblin on, my cat Jinxie really gets pissed off. So, Anyway, this movie is about Susie, an American that goes to a prestigious ballet academy in Germany. And spoiler alert, more women on women hate. They're ballerinas, they're in competition with each other, they're jealous, things like that. Shenanigans ensue, and she ends up finding out the hard way that it's actually a witch's coven. So Amazing movie. Another fun factoid about this was Dario Argento originally wanted it to be children, young girls in a ballet academy. But the studio thought it was too dark, so he had to change it to like teen girls. And so throughout the movie, you'll see things like doorknobs and stuff like that are really high up because it was supposed to be like little girls like reaching up. Super unsettling, but I would like to have seen a Dario Argento version where they were young girls because it would have been great as well. This is one of my absolute favorite horror movies, one of my absolute favorite movies. The color palette, everything about it is amazing. I seriously suggest you see it. So before I get too long in my video, I'm going to wrap it up. Episode 5, I'll give you a little hint, is going to be about demon, creature, monster-themed female movies. And it's going to be a monster mash. I'm here all night. So again, sweet children of mine, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. I can't wait for the next episode. And happy Women's History Month.